Hello, fellow guitarists, and today we're gonna be talking about one of the most controversial topics ever. Welcome to second part of Ultimate Guitar Buying Guide, and today we're gonna be talking about TONEWOOD. Because most of the time on the internet, almost everyone who speaks about it defends one of the opinions. Either the TONEWOOD matters or it doesn't. So today we're gonna be listening to luthiers, guitar players, sound engineers, and even reading some research papers from scientific journals. Of course, before we start, I need to say that we're only talking about electric guitars, because it's a pretty stupid thing to deny that acoustic guitars, wood is how they produce their sound. And denying this is, it's a complete nonsense. So, yes, I'll start my video with explaining you how does acoustic instrument works. Denying influence of the wood in the acoustic instrument is a stupidity because it constructed the way that wood matters there. Because when you strike a note either on violin or on a guitar, it goes through the bridge. Bridge is linked to the body. Body is hollowed out, and if you know that every hollowed construction kind of creates an amplified sound. And afterwards, when the sound goes through the body, it amplifies through the wood and goes out through the resonant holes far louder. So wood there does matter. It's a complete stupidity if someone said you that the wood doesn't matter in acoustic instruments. But if we look here, solid body electric guitars doesn't have this kind of a construction. So let's talk about it. Let's dive really deep into it and find out, does the wood really matters? Let's start with one of the biggest TONEWOOD advocates, the very famous luthier Paul Reed-Smith, and to be honest, his takes are rather bad because they are most of the time a scientific fallacy. And although I don't have anything against the guy, he definitely knows how to work with the wood and everything, and his guitars are rather great. And to be honest, I kind of enjoy some of his videos where he speaks about how he creates guitars. I genuinely can't agree with what he said. First of all, let's go through the take number one.
I found an argument in Germany when I was over there that I think sticks. If the instrument doesn't matter and it's only the pickup, then a concert violinist would go up to a Neumann microphone and the violin would not matter at all. It's his hands and the microphone. That's it. That's all that matters, according to the internet. What a load of crap.
And that's why I even started this video by explaining why acoustic instruments do work completely different from electric instrument. Because comparing violin with the electric guitar is kind of a stupid thing, because you compare electric instrument to acoustic instrument, and then you comparing two different types. If you ever saw the electric violins, they don't even have the same shape. And it's rather common to find electric violin that is completely woodless. So it can be made out of carbon fiber or any other material. Still, it does matter because in acoustic instrument, wood is the matter of amplification, but in electric instrument, you have pickups and you have the dedicated amp. Same goes to electric violins, they have a piezo system inside them. Second is the take about rubber bridge and takes about Vaseline.
Which means if I make the guitar out of balsa wood and I put a rubber nut on it and a rubber bridge and the strings are dead and they're covered in Vaseline, the only thing that makes any difference is the pickup and your new pedal. Is that correct? Great. I quit.
Well, the main thing here is that if string resonates, pickup picks it up. If you somehow affect the vibration of the string itself, it will sound worse. That's why you need to change the string from time to time. It's as simple as that. And rubber bridge and nut, there is very important thing. For certain resonance, you need to make instrument out of hard materials, and rubber is not a hard material. It kinda dampens the vibration. That's the reason why rubber is sometimes used as a dampening material. And in a guitar, you can have a plastic nut, you can have some kind of a synthetic bone, real bone, graphite, you can have a wooden nut, for example, or a metal one, and they will work when rubber won't, because all of the previous materials are hard. Let's speak with most common explanation of how TONEWOOD works, because the easiest way to explain this is that when you attack the certain note, the guitar vibrates, and yeah, for sure, we can feel it. And because of wood combination, it transfers back only certain vibrations. And because of the certain vibrations, which this wood kinda amps up, we have a certain tonal feedback that is basically enhanced by the wood. So let's dive deeper into it. Once again, if we play the guitar unplugged, we can definitely agree that unplugged guitar kinda has its own sound signature. Yes, they don't sound the same. And I will give you a few examples right now. But now let's dive deeper into other luthiers, and the next one who I would like to introduce to you is Highline Guitars. He had a very interesting video about the TONEWOOD, where he kind of came to a conclusion that it's a rather stupid idea to try to define the sound of electric guitar through the TONEWOOD.
Because a lot of guys think that you can shape the tone of an electric guitar based on the selection of the wood. In other words, if you want a warm tone in your guitar, you would pick mahogany. If you want a really bright, crisp tone, you'd select maple. Or, if you had mahogany for the body, you could put a maple cap on it, and in that way you can sort of dial in and massage the tone. But the reality is you can't, and nobody actually does that. I don't care what people say. I can go into my lumber supplier and select 5 similar size, similar dimensioned slabs of mahogany or mahogany boards, and every one of them is going to have a different so-called tap tone, because they were all cut from different trees that were grown in different environments. And as a result, they just don't have the same sound. I've had mahogany that sounded as bright or so bright that you would think it was maple if you didn't know better. I've had maple that sounded really warm. It's just how wood is. It's not, the tone is not determined by the species, it's determined by the specific board. Moisture content affects it. How much sunlight the tree was getting, how much wind it was exposed to, was it on a steep hill, on a flat plain? All these things affect how the tree grows and what the tone is going to sound like from the boards that are cut from that tree. So the idea that you can select a specific species and that's what's going to generate the tone of your guitar is just preposterous.
For example, here I have a piece of redwood in this guitar. It's called Meranti, and most of the time manufacturers describe this as mahogany, as the red wood. And only few of them describe this as a Meranti or write down the name in Latin, which states that it's a Meranti. It's some kind of an Indonesian relative of a mahogany. And is the first thing. So basically we can describe this thing as mahogany. Will it act as an African one? Of course not. Second is that, I will show you the picture, is that certain historical things can also affect the wood. So for example, some kind of a tornado, firestorms, wildfires, strokes of lightning. All of this will affect the material of the wood. So you can get the situation where you have a few rings growing closer together and sometimes they have a bigger distance on the same piece of wood from the same cut. And then you can get the situation where you get a different age of wood, and once again the material will be closer together. Also very important to know that any acoustic guitar, at least the high-end one, will have certain sound tuning towards them. And what does the sound tuning mean? Well, to have some kind of a consistent sound in every model, the luthier, while creating the guitar, will remove a bit of the material. I genuinely recommend you to watch the full Highline Guitar video about it. It's extremely interesting. And if we had the same approach to electric guitars, every electric guitar will have just a bit different body, a bit different thickness, maybe sometimes it will be a bit different. And we don't have this. So once again, it's pretty hard to define specific sound patterns in terms of wood. So let's go further. And while we're still with the Highline guitars, I had a chat with him in the comments because I had my own take here that when we are talking about wood affecting the sound of the electric guitar, we're forgetting about one very important topic. And this topic being that, well, when we are playing the electric guitar, we don't have any direct way to interfere with the wood. So if we are feeding in the vibration of the string to the wood, we are doing this either when we play open note through the nut and the bridge, and then also if we fret the note, we do this through the fret and the bridge. So, and then if we are getting the certain vibrations back, they are once again transferred through one of these 3 points, from 2 of the 3 points to be exact. And this should affect the sound, to which he genuinely agreed. And I will give you one great example. Here I have a guitar with tunematic bridge. And tunematic has a quite different construction to the hardtail. And the biggest difference here being that it only transfers the sound through 2 posts to which it connected. And you know what? Tunematic is far louder unplugged. We should also admit that frets, nuts, and bridges do also affect the sound, both in terms of construction and materials. So different nickel or stainless steel alloy in frets should have a different sound. Different nut material should have a different sound. Different material on the bridge and different construction should also affect the sound. Then we go to guitars with trem systems. And if you see here, they don't really have much of connection to the wood. The only place here where it connects directly is at these 2 trem points. And maybe just a bit of the sound can be transferred through those 2 screws. But once again, the springs should dampen a lot of the vibration. And maybe if the bridge is not floating, it can lay on the back of the guitar and also transfer a bit of the vibration there. So we also need to consider this thing. So the guitar with trems do have a tone block, and this tone block should also affect the tone because it's one of the main resonant points here. So the brass, the aluminium, the thickness and everything should also affect the sound of the guitar. But no one speaks about it, and this is what bugs me. So when we speak about TONEWOOD and tone materials, we should need to speak about far more different parts. But let's go just a bit deeper. One of the best, if not the best guitarists in the world, Guthrie Govan, had one of the best takes that defends TONEWOOD that I ever heard.
Some people say wood is not important, it's only the pickups.
As for the online bickering about wood, that's because the online world just rewards people for arguing about pointless shit. The truth is, obviously the wood makes a difference. And what these guys with their oscilloscopes are missing out on is, this is a structure. This is not a free-floating metal string and a free-floating pickup. Everything is attached to everything else. If wood didn't make a difference, then you wouldn't hear that. Sometimes you get 10 identical guitars and one of them has a dead spot. You hear it acoustically and you hear it through the amp. So ignore those people, they're a waste of your time. So that's enough about the wood debate, I hope.
Dead notes are very interesting. To be honest, it's the part where it's really hard to disagree with Guthrie, because it's really hard to deny a dead note and the reason why it even appeared. And the problem with them is that there is one way how to beat a dead note, at least partially, is to grab your guitar and land your headstock, for example, on the table or against the wall. And then, by some magical reason, because you basically added just far more resonant mass to the guitar, it kind of disappears. So yeah, some kind of a wood vibration or vibration of hard materials are definitely maybe in play here. So although it may seem that I am bashing on a TONEWOOD and that it doesn't matter, I also do want to consider some other takes, and this one is really hard to deny one. There is also the take from the channel The Minor Error, where he defends the TONEWOOD and shows this graph. And also shows the video from Warwick, which I will also show you later. And here we are getting the situation where, when we look at the graph from Strandberg, different wood gives a bit different graph. And it's pretty obvious, different frequency response, different sound. Here we don't even consider the fact that maybe they meddled a bit with the settings of an amp or something. We take this as a truthful statement, because we cannot disapprove it. So, is there a big difference in the sound? Well, from this graph, it kind of shows the difference is present. Let's take it as it is. And then go to the Warwick channel, where we have the guitar, where everything stays the same, except but the one part, which is the guitar body. They grab a different body, connect every other piece together there, and then simply give you a sound demo. So let's check it out. The amount of sound difference, I'll let you to decide for yourself. Is it present? In this video, yes. Once again, if you're a TONEWOOD denier, you can say that they meddled with the settings of an amp. I say maybe, but for the sake of this video, we take it as it is. Let's go further. Let's go and listen to one of the most famous sound engineer of latest years, Glenn Fricke. And he also made a video where he, instead of a DI signals or some kind of a settings, he gave us the full mix with two different guitars made out of two completely different TONEWOODs, and gave us two sound demos, to which we will listen right now. Once again, here we are getting the situation where if we listen to the sound in full mix, there is almost no difference. or even there may be no difference. Because once again, when you run the guitar through all of the post-recording editing, you can sculpt the sound the way you personally would like it. And it's once again a very important thing that certain frequencies that, for example, wood gives you, if the wood gives it to you, it can be once again altered by the means of preamplification like EQ pedal, your settings on the amp, and post EQ. Glenn said that maybe there is some difference on the clean, but the more gain you add, the less of a difference you will hear. And here once again must agree with him. He makes a very good example that the more effects you introduce to the sound, the more you move the sound from possible effect of the TONEWOOD to everything else. You know about which we will talk next. Very famous video about the table air guitar. Yes. Here is probably the best destruction of TONEWOOD. Really. You cannot even some kind of a debate with that. But I will say one thing, that in terms of a guitar, if you ever lay this on some kind of a hard material, like for example a wooden table, and strum it, it will become far brighter and have a far more resonant response. And here he used a piece of the table. So at this point, he basically made a huge guitar body. And I will even say from my personal experiences, this thing should sound even better than the real guitar body because of the amount of the material. So yeah, the amount of body wood should also matter if we speak that it affects the sound. But from examples from here and the Glenn Fricker video, we can say that the difference is rather minor if present at all. Another take on the TONEWOOD is this experiment, where we have 3 bodies made out of different materials. And if we listen here, we once again hear certain differences, and they are rather distinct, as in the Warwick video. But once again, the table guitar video were done in a far more scientific way. And it's a very important part because in certain takes here you can clearly hear that it's not only frequency response that changes, but also the amount of gain on different takes. And this kind of leads me to assumption that the pickup height in this video is a bit meddled with. Because if you don't know, pickup height can change the sound of your guitar a lot. And just play a bit with the pickup height and you will understand what I'm talking about. It's not only about the amount of gain, it's about the amount of every frequency. So the high end, the low end, the mids, it can be changed a lot simply by how you set up your pickup height. There is also a few takes from bass manufacturers. Let's listen to Roger Sadowsky. So he implies that fretboard is the most important part in the sound of at least electric bass. But he mentions one thing.
Another incident I can strongly remember is I had built a bass for a top New York session player, and I had a maple fingerboard, and he was complaining he was getting too much clacking noise off of the frets. And so for an experiment, and I followed my gut, I put a neck on that had a rosewood board, and it solved that clacking problem for him. So again, I'm very much convinced maple boards are brighter and tighter, rosewood boards are sweeter and warmer, and that difference is greater than anything I can hear between an alder body and a swamp ash body. Really doesn't matter, in my opinion, what the listener hears. What's important is what the player hears. And what the player hears affects how he attacks his instrument, his touch, his feel. The most important thing is these are differences the player can hear on his own instrument, and it totally affects how he plays his bass.
And here is the most important part. If I grab my guitar and just play a few notes, I hear both sound from the speakers and sound from the body. And it combines for my ears. So for example, if I drop it in a recording, you will only hear the output of the guitar and you will not hear acoustic part. And to be honest, when I compared two demos of this and this guitar, they have different body woods. Yes, it's a substitute of rosewood here, both maple necks, but the bodies from different woods, and they have different pickups. This have a bare knuckle aftermath, and this have a stock quantum. And you know what? In a comparison that I made, and I sent it to a lot of people, most of them didn't really notice much difference between those two guitars. And you know what? I made a recording, I listened to it myself. For example, right now, I don't remember which guitar is which, so it's really hard for me to define those two. But when I play them, both unplugged and plugged, I can hear a lot of difference. And this is the most important part. You are the only one who cares about TONEWOOD, literally. Here is the little clip of a great bassist, Lill Sklar, about his producer switch on his bass.
The only other custom thing that this bass has is this toggle switch right here, and I call it my producer switch. And that way, if I'm doing a session and I'm playing and the producer doesn't like the tone, he asks me to get a different sound, I make sure he sees me flip this switch, and then I just change my hand position a little bit, and they love it. I mean, but there's no wires or anything that go to this switch. It's a placebo. And it saved me a lot of grief. So that's my custom signature thing on this, is my producer switch.
So although Roger Sadowsky stays, as almost any luthier, on the position of TONEWOOD matters, he only one who really cuts all of the unnecessary stuff that it matters only for the player. So for example, I do prefer rosewood fretboards simply because how they feel, not because of a certain sound. That's all. But let's go further and listen to the other bass manufacturer, Dingwall. And let's just go ahead and listen to his take.
And to be honest, no matter what your opinion is, you're both right. It just depends on where you're listening. So if you're at a concert and there's 2,000 people there, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a rosewood fingerboard and a maple fingerboard. You're not going to be able to hear it. You're not going to be able to hear the difference between ash or alder. It's not going to happen. And so I think that's where a lot of the people that don't think it affects tone are getting their opinions from. But the question's too small. It's not just about the tone. Basses have both resonance, wood has both resonance and it has damping qualities. And those are opposite, but they're both going on at the same time. So what resonance is, it's like the springs in your car. So if you don't have shock absorbers and your car hits a bump, the springs in your car are doing this. And as soon as you attach a shock absorber, the shock absorber damps that spring and it does this. So the damping slows down vibration, slows down resonance, and the resonance in wood just kind of vibrates freely, but it only vibrates at certain frequencies. And the frequencies that it damps at are different. And so some of that energy that is being damped out of the wood is just turned into heat through friction, or some of it is being pushed into the resonant properties. So the wood doesn't actually amplify the tone, it just sort of resonates with it, with the vibration of the strings, or it sucks the life out of the strings.
To be honest, he changed his opinion a few times, and it's a funny one. He said that TONEWOOD doesn't matter that much, then he said this.
Right down the center line is the joint, and the bass side on this particular bass is hard and heavy ash, and it really brings out the B string. And then from the center line, treble-wise, it's a lighter, less dense ash, and that warms up the trebles. And you can do that with northern ash and alder, which is what we do with the Lill Sklar model, and that's the most dramatic one that we do. Or you could do it with swamp ash. So what? You've got two different densities of wood, but that can't make a difference, Sheldon. It's an electric instrument with a big chunk of aluminum on top of it for a bridge. How can that possibly make a difference? And it's pretty spooky. If you take a Lill Sklar model and you plug it in and take the strings off and then tap on the saddles, you can hear the tone change. Just tapping on the saddles. It's really, really cool.
I don't know which one is first, but it doesn't matter that much. At this point, I would kind of disappoint him because the whole body resonates. And it's very important part that you cannot just put one stripe of something and it won't resonate in the nothingness. It will interact with every other party in the guitar. So this is one of the worst takes I've heard personally, but yeah, it still exists. We need to talk about it. Personally, I don't believe this one. I can take almost any other take except of his. And now let's dive into one of the most interesting parts of this video. I found out a scientific research made in Poland by, and let me write this from the screen because I probably butcher those names, but still, by Jakub Puszyński, Waldemar Moliński, and Anna Preis. So they have a really interesting research with a good methodology, to be honest. It called the effect of wood on the sound quality of electric instruments. I will link it down below. I would personally advise you to go and read through the full article, but here is a brief explanation. First of all, they grabbed planks of wood on which they simply stringed one string, tuned it to the different pitches, and then measured both of microphonic and electromagnetic response. So they could compare both acoustic sound and how it correlates to the electric sound. So basically this is the most foolproof study, to be honest. So I will throw you the pictures here from the study itself, so both the construction they used, how they measured both microphonic and electromagnetic responses. It'll be somewhere here. So what results they acquired? Well, first of all, they didn't have any clear correlation between the wood and the sound and timbre. Statistic analysis show non-significant ambiguous effect of wood species on parameters of sound. And the wood species do in fact affect the acoustic sound of electric instrument. So most of the time, as I previously described in the situation with two of my guitars, plugged in on a high gain setting, they sound almost exactly the same, although they have different pickups, different woods, even body shapes are a bit different. but when I am playing them, I hear a lot of difference. They're really not that much of the same. They are pretty much two distinct instruments. So, the result of this scientific paper kind of shows us that wood doesn't play that much of a difference in terms of sound of electric instrument, but some small effects are present. Also, I will put here one very important argument against the TONEWOOD: ear test. If we have two guitars made from different pieces of wood, from different species, will you able to define one from another simply without looking at them? Can you define a maple fretboard against the rosewood one? Can you define swamp ash body versus the mahogany one? Probably not. Almost no one can. The only person I know who was able to do this was Rob Chapman. In his Undertones video, they're hella entertaining. I don't know, maybe there is some staging, maybe they're not. Still. For example, I cannot say, oh, this is a maple fretboard. But I can say that, for example, from how guitar sounds, I can define Strat from a Jazzmaster and from a Tele. So I can say this pickup is in this guitar, but I cannot say same about wood species. So now let's jump to conclusions. So what do we have as a result? We have two takes that deny one another, but in the end, they're both correct in their own way. So let me explain this. On the one hand, we cannot deny that wood affect acoustic resonance, and some of it, especially on a low gain, clean sound with no effects, may have certain effect on the sound of the guitar. But, first of all, your perception of the sound comes not only from plugged-in sound, but also from certain acoustic resonances that you hear. And this paints a different picture for you than for a listener. So, once again, you hear the difference that will probably not be present that much in the recording. It's really hard to define one species of wood from another. Also, because of every wood being a unique living being, you can get a swamp ash that will sound more like a mahogany, and mahogany that will sound more like a swamp ash, and you cannot deny this. You can get a certain very unique specimen that grew somewhere in a different place, in a different environment, or in just one place that was different. So, does TONEWOOD matter? Not that much. In a plugged-in sound, it will not extend more than 10 or 5%, and the effect of the TONEWOOD can be easily fixed by equalizer pedal. Yes, it's that easy. If you need more mids or highs, you can simply add them through the equalization. You can add them on your amp, and you can add them or remove them in post. So the TONEWOOD in the world of modern music production doesn't matter at all. So this is why Glenn Fricker in his TONEWOOD denying position is absolutely correct, because he's a sound engineer, and you need to understand this. He doesn't play guitars that much, he works with complete recordings. And in terms of complete recording, TONEWOOD doesn't matter at all. As a guitar player, yes, you can hear the acoustic effects of wood resonance, but when you play and record this thing, your listener will never notice this. As a manufacturer, yes, when you once again go from one piece of wood to another, you listen, you do tap tests, you do everything, you hear certain differences. But once again, at this point I'm standing more on the position of the Highline guitars, that if you want certain sound, you need not to change the woods, you need to work with other parts of the guitar. And also, do not forget about the other resonant points. So if the wood matters, so do frets, nut, and bridge. I did swap out the nut on this guitar. It did have certain effect when I swapped out the bone nut on the Graphtec one. Graphtec one, if we compare them in some kind of a drop test, tap test, name yourself, it will be a bit more resonant. It has far more frequencies, so if you drop it, it sounds like a glass, while bone sounds far duller. And as a result of this, the guitar with a Graphtec nut in it, just have just a bit more of everything. But the only person who really had some kind of a, oh yeah, I hear the difference, was one who really into the recording, like finding this perfect tone. So he also said that it doesn't matter that much, but other people who are still into the music, they're playing, they're recording, they're musicians, amateurs most of the time, but still most of them didn't hear that any distinct difference. So what is the overall conclusion? TONEWOOD does have certain effect, but it doesn't matter that much. Personally, I believe that still beautiful flamed maple top looks amazing. I personally love Slump Ash simply for its aesthetic. It's really important for the wood to be perfectly dried, because if you have a lot of moisture, you know what happens. You need a solid material to resonate well, so you need a low amount of water in it. So the less percentage of wetness you have, the better. So, what is the overall conclusion? Any of the takes we had in this video, except by Paul Smith and Dingwall ones, are valid. They have their own point of view in which they work. So, overall, does TONEWOOD matter? For me personally, no, but for you, it's your decision. If you're a TONEWOOD snob, I will not try to change your opinion. If you really think that the sound of your guitar comes from the body, from the fretboard, maybe so. It's also rather important to understand that there is a take that no guitar sounds the same. Well, yes, when you grab it in a store, you have 10 guitars made by the same manufacturer. You need to factor two things. First is that every wood will sound a bit different acoustically. It's a fact. It's a fact. We need to kind of take this as granted. Second is that you may encounter guitar with a hand-wound pickups, and if pickups are hand-wound, they also create just the tiniest bit differences in sound. So you also need to take this in overall equation. Also, you heard about other materials from which you can make a guitar. Some make guitars out of metal. Aristides uses their own compound stuff, like with elements of carbon fiber. Some uses carbon fiber, and you can find some builds on YouTube with a guitar that is made basically out of everything. And this kind of proves that guitar needs to be made from a solid material. First of all, it needs to be resonant by itself, and that's enough for a guitar to work. And those guitars do sound like a guitar. So overall, I can say that TONEWOOD is certainly a thing. One guitar will have a certain difference from another, and it matters only to the player. So if you are buying a guitar to create music that someone will listen to, don't give that much consideration to the TONEWOOD. If you're buying a guitar for yourself, if you can pick from 5 or 10 models, go and do so. It may just give you this tiniest bit of a more satisfaction of playing. My opinion is that I would not recommend anyone to go and snob about the TONEWOOD because of one reason. It's not a healthy thing for your development as a guitarist, because you can go out and saying, oh yeah, this guitar is great, but I need to swap out the pickups, or I need to change my overdrive pedal, I need to change the model of my amp. I like the one, but in the 80s they made them with a little bit of a different kind of approach that changed the sound and give you this something. Personally, I believe it's a trap, because when you factor in that the good sound comes from specific gear, you catching yourself in kind of a cage, because you need certain gear to develop, while in fact you just need to go out and practice. Personally, when I drop some kind of a tone catching, I dial my tone that I like, and I start playing guitar, I become a better player. It's that easy. So I recommend you not to do so and simply play guitars that you like. This is the conclusion about the TONEWOOD. I would say that almost every take present in this video is once again correct. So, yeah, I hope this ends the war, because TONEWOOD is not the most important part in the guitar. Really, there are far more interesting things that we can cover, and we will be covering them in the future. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great day, play good guitars, and bye.